I'm going to start by introducing each of the panel, and each of those will spend about 5 minutes talking about their role and examples and what issues and challenges they've been facing throughout this time. And then after each panellist has introduced themselves and talked about that, then we'll go on to a Q&A session. We've got some questions that have already been posed to the panel, which we'll put to them afterwards, but I'm sure that there'll be questions that arise as we go through, which Richard will be looking at as we go on. So if I can start off by introducing to Charlie Wood. Charlie, do you just want to make yourself known? Hi, Charlie. Charlie is an employment law and HR solicitor based at SAS Daniels in Stockport and Chester, specialising areas that include contracts of employment, policies, procedures and settlement agreements for commercial and individual clients and those in the education sector. Charlie also advises on a wide range of employment and HR matters and is here to offer advice and guidance in respect of COVID-19 related matters. Richard Mortimer. Hi, Richard. Richard has he's head of economy, work and skills at Stockport Council and has extensive experience within the education, learning and skills sector at Stockport Council. He was previously head of learning and employment, where he was the strategic lead on adult learning and employability for Stockport. Richard managed the delivery of Work and Skills Commission, managed Ofsted inspections of adult education, led on increasing employment levels in Stockport, and has led on the Stockport Jobs Match project, which launched last month to help people, help employers and employees find work throughout this time. Mike Lamont. Hi, Mike. Mike is chair of the Board of Directors of Stockport Business Improvement District and the director for RBS Business and Commercial Banking. Mike has 32 years of experience within the RBS group, spending the majority of his time dealing with SMEs, with a specific remit to assist their growth plans and supporting their efficiency and risk profiles. Additionally, he has asset finance, invoice finance, fraud and health and safety commercial knowledge. He's a strong advocate of delivering quality customer service and has a passion for developing NPS within businesses. Paul Whitney. Hi, Paul. Paul is Managing Director of Halliday's Accountants and Business Advisors. Paul heads up the corporate finance team and has over 15 years' experience of mergers and acquisitions, MBOs, business planning and exit planning. He became Managing Director at Halliday's in 2019 and works closely with SMEs to maximise the value of their business and move forward with confidence. And Caroline Simpson. Hi, Caroline. Caroline is Director of Place at Stockport Council, and within hours of the government's initial warnings of the imminent and devastating effect that COVID-19 was about to conflict across Stockport and obviously across the whole of the UK, Caroline and her fellow officers pulled together an Economic Resilience Task Force, a group of businessmen and women representative of the Stockport business community, to pull together a plan of resistance and support. The group meet regularly throughout the week using video conferencing to share strong and up-to-date information from businesses on the issues they are facing, to help respond to those concerns and to highlight to the government the real day-to-day challenges being experienced. And the reason we brought this panel together, the board together, is because we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get the right support that they're looking for and to put the right questions over so that we can help you again, as I say, to navigate through this whole period. So if I can start off with you, Caroline, would you like to just talk a little bit about what your role is, what you're doing, what your work is, etc.?
Thank you, Helen, and good afternoon, everybody. So my day job in the council is Corporate Director for Place, so it's anything to do with the environment, of bins, of looking after the parks, planning, regeneration, development. But in the last few weeks, everybody's kind of day job has been turned on its head, but none so more in the council. We've been focused on three broad areas. The first, backing up our partners in the health and social care sector and us delivering social care ourselves for adults and vulnerable children and the most vulnerable in society. And so we've been working really closely with our health partners to make sure the whole system copes under what is unprecedented circumstances. So far, I'm pleased to say everybody has risen to the challenge. We've not been without certain peaks and certain pressures, but within our broader health system, we have coped really, really well. The second area of work the council's been doing is a whole humanitarian one. So as people have gone into lockdown and we've had residents who've not been able to access the normal services that they can, making sure food parcels are delivered, medicines are delivered, everything that basically people have. We've delivered laptops and iPads to care homes to ensure that people have access to their relatives under the difficult circumstances. So we've mobilised with a huge effort with the voluntary sector, a big humanitarian effort to make sure people keep as safe as possible. And then the third area, Helen's already talked about in brief, which is the whole business of supporting business and the economy through this incredibly difficult time. The council's been really focused on getting out of the door the business grants that have been available, and as a collective, the Economic Resilience Forum and many partners in the room and others have been really focused on supporting businesses with making sure the right information is out there, the guidance is interpreted, and the SK Recovery website now up and running is the start of helping you as businesses with us as support organisations to start to rebuild, come back to life if you've been laid dormant, or adapt and we hope thrive in the future circumstances. We think there's going to be some big kind of obvious announcements on Sunday night. What that means for businesses is absolutely crucial. So first thing Monday morning, we will be looking very carefully how to support you as hopefully we start to come out of lockdown, and what that means in terms of the support available, the information, and how we can keep our workforce and our consumers feeling safe. That's going to increase that consumer confidence. What we want to do as a council is really drive a Stockport first approach over the coming months as we learn to live with COVID, and actually think about, is there a better way that people can thrive in the future? And one area we believe that we can build on is that swell of local support, the kind of neighbourhood resilience, the fact that people are really looking out for their neighbours and looking out for their local areas, and they've spent a lot more time in their local areas. How can we make that work for some of our businesses moving forward, so people understand that when they've got money to spend, if they've got money to spend, they spend it local? So I'm keen to hear views about whether you feel that will be a contributing factor to your success in the coming weeks and months. But I don't underestimate just how tough a position the economy and businesses are finding themselves in at the moment.
Caroline, thank you very much indeed for that. Appreciate it. Mike, can we go on to you now, please? Mike Lamont, thank you.
Okay, as I said, been looking after SMEs for a good number of years, and I think it's obvious to say that we're facing absolutely unprecedented times in terms of probably your dealings with some of the support mechanisms that are out there, in terms of making sure as many of the SMEs survive, through not only the current climate, but the future to come as well. So what I wanted to do is just spend a couple of minutes talking through 3 new products that have been launched into the marketplace in the last month. Just to give you some background, the bank would normally take 9 months to put a product together and launch it through legals. And we've done 3 in a month. It's been an interesting time. So all I would say is it won't be perfect. So bear with your organisations in terms of those processes. But it wouldn't be remiss to say the volume of applications that have come through. It's been unprecedented in terms of us being able to support as many businesses as we possibly can. So I want to just run through the 4 key elements in supporting SMEs and their cash flow. And again, this isn't definitive. There's far more support from your financial partners than this. I'm going to talk from mainly an RBS perspective, but I have to say, in the main, the majority of all banks will be following very, very similar guidelines in terms of the British business banks schemes that were launched. So the first area and product that we've been supporting customers with is capital repayment holidays. So that's where we have existing debt that is, out in the marketplace at the moment, and we're offering up to a sort of 12-month sabbatical on capital holidays. In that sense, there's no change to existing terms and conditions. It is just a freezing of those capital positions. And again, in terms of speaking to existing lenders, I do know that there are a vast array of financial organisations that are offering capital repayment holidays, not restricted just to your commercial bank, but I know from an asset finance perspective, from a general mortgages perspective, and also from a credit card and personal mortgage perspective, there are capital repayment holidays in place. Obviously, that doesn't mean that you're sort of missing out on making those repayments. Those will need to be either rescheduled throughout the term of the loan, but we're trying to be as flexible as we can to get through and provide as much cash as we can over the coming sort of 12 months. The first new scheme that was submitted and came out from the British Bank was CBILS, which is a facility that is aimed at SMEs over a 6-year period. It is a loan facility. It is based on a criteria of all businesses up to a turnover of £45 million, and is an offer, although this does change between banks, in the region of £50,000 as a minimum application, up to £5 million. Again, I just must re-emphasise this: it is a risk product, it is a loan. So, in terms of this particular area, you will need to require to provide to your bank a reasonable amount of information, as you'd expect us to assess a business's viability in determining that funding requirement. Some of the terms of that scheme: there's no personal guarantees required under £250,000, or no pledging of security that might feature in standard facilities of this nature, including primary residence of directors or partners. It's unlikely that any additional security will be required under 250, but obviously up to £5 million, there is a discussion there to be had about sitting behind the government's 80% backing of the scheme. Obviously, it's a £330 billion scheme, so in terms of, it's a common misconception in some respects that the bank is only taking a 20% risk. Obviously, that 20% risk, when you add up against 330 billion, is significant, and therefore it is an application process that is required there. Above 45 million is a large CBILS, so interruption loan scheme. Very, very similar, other than the repayment profile is over a 3-year term. And in both schemes, it is interest and fee free and capital free for the first 12 months. So no payments to be made for 12 months. So those facilities are being put in place today. But, at the end of the day, there will be no repayments until a minimum of April 2021 on those. So, the benefits of the cash flow is immediate. And then recently, as last week, the Chancellor announced a BBL scheme, which is aimed at small and micro businesses. And that is a scheme aimed at a loan of between £2,000 and £50,000 over exactly the same term of 6 years. Again, this one has a fixed interest rate right across the banking sector. So all banks are following this at a 2.5% fixed cost. And again, no repayments over the first 12 months. Slightly different to this scheme than the CBILS scheme for slightly larger businesses is that it is based on a personal attestation by the business. So the application is meant to be very quick, very slick. The vast majority of lenders are using an online portal, and it is expected that, as quickly as 24 hours, but certainly within 72 hours, we'd expect funds to be in businesses' accounts, and that's up to £50,000 over a 6-year term. So again, 4 new schemes that have been launched there, which are very, very different and actually quite confusing, for somebody who's been in commercial banking for 32 years, because I'm dealing with it every minute of every day. It becomes second nature to you, but when we speak to customers, the one thing that we're finding it is quite difficult to meander through the different, should I apply for that? Am I put myself at risk at that, etc., etc. So my biggest plea to anybody is to make sure that you surround yourself with your professional advisors networks, and obviously we've got some of those on the call today, but absolutely engage early with your bank and your relationship manager, if you have one, to make sure that they can support you in putting the right level of application. And I think one of the keys that we've been working to is is what you're applying for enough? Because actually we're considering a 6-month serious lockdown situation. That's no reflection of what will be announced on Sunday. But, you know, from a financial perspective, there's no point in being under pessimistic about the situation. So again, I would ask you to stretch it out as much as possible. The application forms are all online. They are available through the British Business Bank and on your individual websites for your individual banks. And I would ask you to probably first go to those initially to get the full details. I'm conscious of time, and I have got a whole host of best practices that I can go through, but perhaps if you want to come back to that at some stage, Helen, I'm quite happy to run through in terms of the application process and perhaps what might speed things up.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yes, we do have a number of questions with regard to the loans available, so I will probably come back to you. As I said, if we don't get through all the questions, we will endeavour to answer them all offline and then post them online for future reference. Okay, Richard Mortimer, can I come to you next, please?
So basically, I work for Caroline, and she's covered a lot of information about the sorts of things that the council have been doing. I manage a team of people who provide business support. So in the past, traditionally, that would have been everything from looking for premises, issues around skills and employment and recruitment, import, export, access to finance, etc., etc. So in the last 8 weeks or so, really, our work has shifted massively, as you can imagine, to dealing with the initial economic shock to Stockport in terms of the impact on businesses and employment rates, etc. And we were very keen to get things in place to make sure that the business grants payments were made as quickly as possible. And Stockport actually performed very well on that. We've got a great team in our business rates team who've done a really cracking job. Basically, under 4,500 grants out, nearly £51.7 million. That's around 80% of eligible businesses, and my team are working at the moment on a contact list of those businesses that we thought would be in scope and eligible, and we've not heard from them, so we're chasing them up just to try and point out that the financing is available, and are they aware, and is there a reason why they've not applied. So we're busy doing that kind of work. At the same time, we've been very keen to gather intelligence from businesses about the sorts of things that are going on for you. You know, how is it impacting on you? What are the issues that you're facing? What kinds of things might we be able to do to help and provide support? Obviously, we're not in a position to guarantee that we'll be able to answer everything and do everything for you, but wherever we can, we're certainly doing what we can. And that includes, for example, lobbying GM in terms of issues that we're coming across and asking for their help and support in passing that up the line to government. We have a weekly catch-up call every week with the department going on, and the sorts of requests that businesses are making for additional things and support. We're certainly passing that up the line. You may be aware, for example, that in the last week, the government has extended the business grant scheme. So again, we're in a position where we're waiting for the further guidance from government about what are the rules and what can we do with that. And as soon as we've got anything in place locally, we'll be letting people know and putting that out. Communication has been a key thing. Colleagues from Marketing Stockport have been great in helping us to provide daily communications to businesses. One of the things I think that I wasn't necessarily expecting or prepared for was the pace at which things have moved in terms of announcements, changes, things that have been going on. Sometimes it's been a real challenge to keep on top of what is the latest position and what was the latest information and the right document to look at to get the guidance that we need. So we've been putting that on the Marketing Stockport website and through the council's web pages to try and make sure businesses have exactly the right information that's current and it is what they need. We're also providing ongoing support to businesses in terms of looking up with Business Growth Hub and the specialist advisors they have there to help mitigate some of the impacts that you might be facing at the moment. We've organised the local business barometer survey that was handled through the bid team. So I hope you've seen that and responded to that. And it's vitally important that you do communicate with us and let us know the sorts of things that you've got going on. Stockport Jobs Match website, for example, we set up very quickly as we knew there would be people who would be underemployed in terms of their availability. And we were looking to match them with businesses that are experiencing a surge in demand. So, for example, on supermarkets that needed additional drivers. And then we have a lot of taxi drivers, for example, who needed work. So it's quite an obvious to spend local and to help our businesses to stay resilient and to build back and grow and to build back better. So do keep in touch. We've got the Economy WS email address which you can use, and I'm sure Helen will be able to put that out to you all later.
Thank you very much, Richard. Appreciate that. Obviously, a lot of useful information. Can I go to Paul Whitney now, please? Paul, from Hallidays.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Helen. Thanks for the introduction earlier, and thanks for allowing us on here. Fair to say that Hallidays has been doing a lot of support work with clients, especially since March. It's gone through a few phases. There was an initial panic that I think everybody probably met for their business, whether they were part open, closed, fully operational. Our business clients that number sectors, so as you'd expect, there are a chunk of clients who are not profiteering but doing quite well out of the current scenario. You've got the ones that deliver equipment into the sort of PPE arena. You've got the ones that do the chemical cleaning, manufacturing. Lots of businesses are doing okay. There's a rump in the middle that will be all right through this, having to take quite significant measures to safeguard the business through this period. And then there are probably a third of businesses that might be struggling in some way, shape or form due to closure, part closure, huge drop in the turnover levels, etc. So we went through an initial 2 to 3 week firefight. People will have seen announcements of redundancies, and that went all the way through to the smaller end of the sector. We deal in SME client-based, owner-managed businesses, so right in that arena. And then when the furlough measures were announced and the support packages, everybody realised that, or most business owners realised that those measures may get them through. So at Hallidays, we're all about support and growth, but all of our focus from our front-facing teams turned to the sort of support phase. Lots of proactivity calls, speaking to clients daily. The team were on the phone to clients permanently, as I'm sure some of the other panelists will have been with their clients and Stockport supporting the businesses. So we've helped clients with the whole grant piece, moving forwards towards the 20th of March, furlough opening. Richard mentioned just then about it being really fast-paced. I think everybody will have realised that the furlough portal, the furlough measures, the way it was set up changed all the time. No doubt Charlie will say a bit more about this. It's his realm, but for our front-facing teams, dealing with those furlough grant claims for clients took a significant proportion of their time from the 20th through to the end of the month, really. So lots of work being done in that area. Focus has now turned somewhat to the self-employed grant claims. We've got lots of work in the background going on that at the moment, and how we can support our clients in that area. I guess coming out of the initial 2 to 3 week panic phase, when people were thinking of what costs they could cease or defer from a business modelling perspective, Mike referred earlier to the loans, so there's no point really going on too much about that. Apart from, I guess, the certainly on the CBIL side, the level of drawdown from clients has been very disappointing. There's lots of loans stuck. This isn't a bank bashing session because the banks have been somewhat thrown into the lion's den on this. So I feel a lot of sympathy for what they've had to put up with very quickly. But you can see from the bounce back loans, I think Michael had the figures, but a couple of billion has been released in the first day, whereas I think they're only on 5.5 billion from the UK finance site, as I saw it this morning, overall on the CBILS loans. So, it's just sort of 70,000 CBILS loans overall drawn down, very low numbers in comparison to what you'd expect. So lots of businesses that we act for that really need those loans. Until the BBLs were launched, there were plenty of businesses right on the edge and struggling because they were waiting for perhaps furlough grant payments, lots of overhead costs still to meet, only certain deferrals available on capital payment holidays, rates relief, the grants coming in on the 10k and the 20, they seem to have been freed up a lot. So lots of hand holding around there. I think we've seen a shift now towards, okay, we've dealt with our business model as it stands at the moment. What do we do now? What's this going to look like coming out of lockdown? We feel as business advisors that deal with cash flow planning, loan releases, M&A transactions all the time on my team at Holidays, we feel that the cash flow pressure will really come when we release from lockdown, businesses start to trade again, probably in many cases on a much lower level than they were doing before, for at least a period. Might mention 6 months then. I think even if lockdown lasts for 3 months, the next 3 month period after that will be really critical. We all know that when companies start to grow in turnover again, that's when the cash flow pressure is on. So we're very, very focused at the moment on the front-facing teams, speaking to the clients, finding out exactly where they think they stand on that. One of the most overused words in this period is pivot. Lots of businesses have pivoted to do different things. We've got gin companies making hand sanitizer. We've got all sorts of people looking down different routes. I guess the British entrepreneurial spirit has really kicked in here, and lots of businesses are changing what they do. But at the end of the day, they're still left facing what will this business look like, employing this number of people that we do in this situation, office space, warehouse space, commercial space. We've still got the overhead costs to manage. So we're doing a lot of 13-week planning, a lot of 13-week cash flow planning. Many of the CBILS loan applications require 12-month look forward, integrated forecasts. So we're doing a lot of work around that area as well with clients, just helping them to understand what that means. What worries us, I think, most at the moment is that there's a lot of business owners that have looked at this debt funding that's available and gone, well, hang on a minute, the business owners as usual are suffering here. The employees are all okay. I know they're not all okay because there are redundancies being made and unemployment's up, but the business owners are left carrying the can for this, and they're left with, coming out of lockdown, lots of HMRC deferrals, VAT deferrals, PAYE deferrals to get them through, rent deferrals. They're all there. They're all still there, those costs. The loans at the back end are still there to repay over a period of time. You've got some of the grant funding that was very welcome, that is a real grant. You've got the furloughing, which is a real grant. But a lot of the other measures are stacked up costs that need to be met. We feel on some business owners are deferring, looking at their cash flow planning, and it might be too late. I know the insolvency practitioners, none of which we have on today, are expecting a significant upturn in the back end of 2020. And I think what we're seeing across our clients, their thoughts on that. So lots of work being done in that area at the moment. And then finally, what does the future look like? What is the new norm? Many businesses just won't operate ever again in the way that they did before lockdown. Things are different. Things are different for our firm. We've got 100% operation off-site and operating quite efficiently, if we're honest. So many businesses are thinking that they really need to look at what they do and how they operate. There's a bizarre quirk at the moment as well, which none of us, I don't think, expected, where I think it was mentioned on one of the marketed Stockport releases. We've got a number of clients at the moment in the construction industry that are going back to sites this week, last week, and they were initially sending requests round for who might want to come back from furlough. Struggling with those numbers. Plenty of people are quite enjoying their life on 80% on furlough, and I think this situation of what does this business look like when people come off furlough back into operation needs to be quite carefully managed. So yeah, that's what we're up to, Helen.
Thanks very much, Paul. Appreciate that. God, there's so much to cover. I'm sure we're not going to get near any of it, near half of it in this hour, but we'll continue to hold these sessions so we can talk again in the future. Charlie Wood, please join.
I'll keep it brief because I know we've probably got quite a few questions waiting. But a little bit about what I do. So I tend to support employees and businesses, and at the moment, predominantly it's the business focus that we're looking at. I think the key word here that everyone's mentioned is support. I think it's a time where we're all trying to support each other. Things have changed so rapidly, especially, our biggest challenge in the firm was when furlough was introduced. The guidance was so unclear and so uncertain. It was adapting to that new guidance that came out almost daily, sometimes hourly, digesting that and then feeding that back to clients. I think that's what was affecting a lot of the businesses the most, and still is to a degree, was the uncertainty of it all. Is we can make plans as best we can, but until things are pinned down, it's kind of hard to see that focus. And I think everyone, especially in my team, has heard the furlough word about 1,000 times a day, and it's well ingrained in all of us now. But I think we're moving from a period of the uncertainty of furlough, how that scheme would work, how businesses were looking to support themselves and move forward into this. And now we're kind of looking at, is there a bit of light at the end of the tunnel? Yes, I think it will still take a few months before we're back to normal, or what the new normal will look like. But I think now businesses are starting to think of, right, how do we start getting people back in? As we were saying before, people in the construction industry, I've not seen that from my construction clients. They are looking to get people back on site now, but it's when you send those emails around, people are quite happy to be on furlough, and that's understandable, because I think while it's partly the happy on furlough, it's also the uncertainty of, do I feel safe going back into work? And I think, for a lot of people, that's quite reasonable. A lot of clients have come to me and said, well, we put out such communications and employees won't come back in, and they're refusing to come back in. Well, you've got to look at, is that refusal unreasonable? And I think, on the whole, in some of the circumstances, you can see why people will have those kind of concerns about going back to normal when the situation isn't normal yet. But it's about how businesses manage that. And ultimately, there are ways forward. There are ways we can get around that. And kind of, it's more about communication. I always find out about this at every seminar I go to, is it's communicating with your employees. There's nothing better than keeping those communication channels open. If you inform your employees what you're doing to ultimately support them, it's not all about the businesses. Yes, they need to survive as well, but you wouldn't be making the decisions you have to, which are very difficult decisions in the circumstances, if it wasn't for the benefit of the business and the people. So it's communicating that, to making them aware that's what you're doing. And as Paul was saying as well, what we try to do is actively communicate with our clients and keep them up to date as things are changing, so that they can then disseminate that to their employees as well. The more information, the better you communicate with people, the better. But I think at the moment, there's that transition we're seeing now from the initial kind of almost panic to a degree stage of the furlough, moving into, right, how do we set ourselves up in the best way to get back to what could be a new normal?
Thank you very much, Charlie. Like I say, there's an awful lot. I'd like to field some questions now to the panel, if that's okay. We have had a number in via email, as I said, and we will try to get to as many as we can. But if I can start going back with you, Paul. Question: how can we best manage our business working capital coming out of lockdown?
Yeah, I mean, as I touched upon in the intro, it's a tricky thing, because many businesses have changed in the way that they're operating and aren't quite sure about how that's going to look moving forwards. And that's one of the challenges that the banks have when they're looking at people that are requesting loan facilities. Michael, no doubt, comment on that. The look forward test that's always traditionally been used for lending, as well as the reverse viability checks, the look back checks, are tricky. So the way they can best prepare, I think, is the modelling of the business, the real detail of the modelling of the business. Many business owners that we're talking to at the moment are looking at their cost bases, not just the people, which is in many cases the big cost, but the premises, the way they're structured, the way they're buying, and looking at how that will work moving forward. Some have got new income streams, some have lost income streams. Those all need to be factored in. So where for us, where clients have wanted to look at it themselves, we've been sharing simple modelling tools for them to do it. Where we've got more complex models, where the business might already have some funding in place, like invoice finance, which is variable, we've had to help out with some of the look forward forecasting tests. The first thing I'd suggest that people look at is some 13-week, 3-month weekly cash flows, the real ins and outs of the business, and try and get to the nub of where that lies and whether there is a cash flow hole. Because where businesses have been mothballed or cocooned, as people call it, over the last few months, I think some businesses are being lulled into a bit of a false sense of security. Some costs have been stacked up. They will need to be paid, as I said earlier. There'll be revenue debts to be paid. There'll be loan debts that, capital on loans that have been deferred, that, as Mike suggested before, are still there. They don't go away. They still need to be repaid. So how does that business modelling from a cash flow perspective? Everybody will have heard of the cash is king saying. It really is. And what a lot of business owners don't realise is that when business ramps back up again, that is when the real working capital requirement kicks in. So you need to look beyond that period and maybe budget for a period beyond lockdown when you do reopen, of reduced trading for a period of time. And many businesses a lot of businesses are on the edge, small profitability anyway. That could easily be wiped out by a sensitivity analysis of a downturn of 5, 10, 15, 20, 30% of their trade. So it does need really careful consideration. And there are some good, Excel-based or digital-based, the clients who are on zero packages, Sage packages, a lot of the bolt-ons now feed off the information and automatically produce some reasonably accurate look forwards, as long as the information going in's okay. So I would urge for, you tend to get feedback from clients that can be, how do I know? How will I know what's going on? You need a crystal ball. Well, you need to plan, you need to put variables in, you need to look at it and flex either way and have a look at how that impacts cash, because not many in the banking world are sympathetic to clients who haven't looked at that and haven't understood where their business model stands in a time of need. We're a bit worried that businesses may look at it too late when there is a bit of a dash for cash in August, September time, which is why I think the insolvency practitioners, with all due respect to them, are licking their lips. There's a lot of businesses that they feel are on the end. They're talking to them now. Perhaps they have got a lot of work now. They might be lulled into a false sense of security. I think that we'll see a lot more businesses struggling. I'm interested to hear Mike's view on that as well from a banking perspective. But the people I'm talking to do feel that the pressure point for cash flow will be down the line a little bit.
Yeah, I think something Charlie said about communication, it's absolutely imperative that you talk to your professional advisors. And I think, the point that Paul made about how would I know as a business owner how my business is going to look in September this year? Well, again, you're going to know your business better than a banker. So it's about us having that conversation between our professional advisors, between the business, and looking back over previous trading, which is clearly the track record that we're going to look and use to. But in terms of recovery, just to sort of talk you through how we're assessing applications, we're looking at a 5-year recovery program. So again, in terms of the debt that we're putting out there, we're not expecting businesses to be returned to normal in September of this year. It's going to be 5 years down the line before we're going to start to think about that business not, in inverted commas, recovering. So that is, that's an inordinate amount of time in terms of a business cycle. But actually, that's how pragmatic we're trying to be about supporting businesses through that. Because again, as an organisation, a bank is like any other business on the call. It's there to make a profit, and it certainly does not make a profit when businesses fail. That's something that I've always talked about in terms of my business. Is I surround myself with successful businesses, ones that plan, ones that can overcome those hurdles as and when they come. This is the biggest hurdle that the majority of businesses will ever forget. And I'm saying that 3 months after talking to people about Brexit and 12 months ago about potential other issues that were on the table. But I think businesses are very resilient to what is happening at the moment. I'm in awe at times of talking to some businesses about how resilient they have been. But I agree with Paul, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, having spoken to the Bank of England last week, that when we talk about cash, businesses actually have on average 25% more cash in them today than they had 3 months ago, which is quite a worrying fact, because actually people have been stockpiling, furloughing, not trading, reducing expenses, deferring rentals, that has to be paid. Other than the grants that we've mentioned, the rest has to be paid. And looking at a forward-looking projection, I'd implore businesses to do that short, medium, and long term. Paul's mentioned 13 weeks, which is great. I would bring it even closer and say, the next important date for you is probably the next time you have to pay your salaries. And that, from the banking perspective, talking about application numbers, we had over 100,000 applications for BBLs in 2 days. And in attempting to assess those, what we're looking at is prioritising where the support is absolutely needed. And, in my team, in terms of the CBILS applications, I would suggest that we've progressed 50% of those to either approval or to a state where I know that approval will happen within the prioritisation for that particular business. Because some businesses don't run out of cash until October, November this year. And in the main, the numbers of businesses, when they do engage with us, are not struggling in cash in the short term. So again, it comes back to that statement of please, 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 doesn't matter how early you think it is or how much knowledge you don't think you have of where the business will go, please engage with your professional advisors and talk to them about what your thoughts are. And we'll never say you're wrong. We'll just say, look, this is what we're seeing in the marketplace at the moment. Have you considered? Have you thought about? And that starts to drive a cash flow forecast. So a lot in terms of that, but cash is absolutely imperative to keep that business moving forward, whatever that is. And I think that early engagement is the key. Okay,
thank you very much for that, Mike. There's some sound advice there. We're getting a lot of questions about which we expected to do about the grant payments and who's maybe slipped through the net. So I've got one here for you, Caroline, if I can just read it out to you. Our rateable value is 16k and the cut-off for the grant is 15,000. We are unable to claim small business rate relief. I totally understand there has to be a cut-off, but our landlord has offered no help either, even though I requested a payment holiday right at the beginning. So we have to find £30,000 per year without staff wages. Is there anything that can be done? And if so, who do I speak to? Ideally, I'd like to have the rates reassessed, but I suspect this isn't possible.
So the starting point for looking at the business rates assessment is the valuation office. So there is, that's the first port of call. What I wouldn't do is necessarily give you a whole lot of confidence in that process, because the valuation office, like many other organisations at the moment, are under immense pressure. But that is the starting point to start a conversation then with the local authority about the business rates assessment. And the sooner you get that lodged, the better. But, as I say, the kind of level of resources that they've got on the backlog that they've got make it not a speedy process. Just a bit of background to the business grants scheme. We have, as Richard said, got out the door just over 51 million. We have been following to the letter the government guidance because basically the money is passported through the local authority. We've been administrating the grant, getting it out as quickly as possible, but then on the basis that the government gives us that money back. What we haven't introduced is any other discretionary elements at the moment. You will be aware of the considerable financial pressures we are under as well in terms of local government, and not only the loss of income but the increased expenditure relating to particularly social care and young people has put our budget severely under pressure this year as local government up and down the land. So we're not able to offer any discretion above what the government have said so far. The other thing to say is there is another top-up element of the business grant scheme that you will have seen announced over the last week. That's got some guidelines attached to it at the moment, but a certain amount of discretion locally. And we are awaiting guidance coming on, well, we hope today. I'm not sure it'll come today now, but possibly next week to help us to understand what level of discretion we have with that extra money. We think it'll add up to circa 3 million for Stockport, but that isn't confirmed yet. That won't be confirmed until we've got the additional guidance. And we're currently working through, based on the guidelines that government have given us, where best to place that 3 million, but we will be again working within government guidelines. So starting point valuation office, really tricky situation. But that's all I can offer at this stage.
Okay, Caroline, thanks. We also had a question about the eligibility criteria for the additional top-ups. Have you got any more news on that at the moment, or are you waiting for guidance on that?
Yeah, we're waiting for guidance. I mean, there are some guidelines that have come out already, which is about supporting businesses that haven't had grant already, haven't had any kind of support network, as being one of the principles. But you know, more to come on that next week. And as soon as we've got details of a scheme, be sure we will be communicating it very clearly through the communication channels we've established over the last few weeks.
Thank you very much. Richard, I've got a question for you, Richard Mortimer, please. Stockport has a high number of startup businesses, and a lot of these entities, especially those who have commenced in the last 18 months, have been caught between the cracks. Startups are already faced with inherent challenges to achieve success with no financial support and work grinding to a halt. What can be done to help these businesses that do fall through the cracks? I know in Stockport especially we have, I think 60% of the businesses are SMEs, quite sort of small employers. Have you got any advice for those?
Yes, and sadly, it's not about saying that we've got, you know, a chest of money that we can dip into and necessarily provide a financial solution. Startup businesses, you know, we are aware are under pressure, and we've been feeding that information back in through the feedback loops that we have back to GM and up to government. But there may be support that we can put you in touch with through the Business Growth Hub with specialist advisors who can look at help and support around how you structure your business. Some of the things that have already been mentioned about kind of maintaining the right priorities around your financial commitments and being agile and flexible about what you're doing. But that's probably as much as we can do at this time. You know, we are constrained by the regulations that the government have attached to their financial support packages. We are administering them, but we don't necessarily get to have that much say in the rules at the moment. As Caroline's just said, you know, we're waiting for further guidance about the additional monies that have been announced. But the early indications on that are that, you know, they are going to be targeted and prioritised to certain groups and sectors as well. So we'll have to see how that goes. Again, for any individual businesses that want advice and support, I would encourage them to contact us through that Economy WS email, and I'll get one of my team to talk to you and provide you support and signpost you through to Business Growth Hub as well.
Thank you very much. Charlie, furlough is obviously going to be a big question. People are going to be asking a lot about what happens, how's it going to be eased out, etc., etc. But when certain sectors do actually get back to open up, like things like the bars and the restaurants eventually, in places where you would normally expect to be crowds of people, do you think there's going to be guidance as to how those operations can open in a safe and secure way?
Yeah, I think there will be, but I think it's going to be, I think in terms of how they're going to ease furlough off, there's no guidance in relation to that yet. Although some people have proposed what they may do is, instead of a hard cliff edge at the end of June, they might say, well, instead of the 80% will contribute 60%, 40%, 20% of salaries and kind of phase it out gradually. But again, that's subject to what the guidance will come out. In terms of, your pubs and clubs and kind of areas where people tend to come in high volume, yes, they might release guidance. I think they probably will, to say 2 meters apart and the usual social distancing rules. But it's how effective that will be in practice, because I've been seeing some things on the news where, especially more independent bars and restaurants, they might usually fit in, say, 30 to 40 covers. If they put in social distancing measures, they can fit in 4 covers. And it's just not economical to open a whole business to fit in that few people. So, guidance may come from the government, but I think for a lot of businesses, it still won't allow them to open as normal.
Okay, thank you. Interesting question here. I think it's for Caroline. Are the council getting any guidance and support from central government in relation to planning applications from SMEs who are looking to change the permitted use of existing buildings? In cases where time is critical for businesses to change the way that they operate, are there plans being put in place to make the planning approval process as efficient as possible to support business resilience at this critical time?
Thanks, Helen. Really good point. So we are still processing planning applications. We have a team that is working, as normal on planning applications. We have had a reduction, so we should be pretty quick at turning them around at the moment. My understanding is there aren't delays. In fact, we've got through, whatever backlogs we have. So in terms of speeding up, there isn't any formal change to the planning process, but I would say from a Stockport point of view, we're pretty good at turning them around. There isn't any relaxation on planning rules in terms of government guidance that I'm aware of. Having said that, and I'll double check this afternoon with my planning colleagues. But what we absolutely will be taking is any discretion, any flexibility from a council perspective that we can to support small businesses in this current time. I will, following this call, because I think it's a really good point, I will put a message out to the planning departments and ask them to let me know if they've been approached by businesses that we've not been able to support through change of use. Just so we give it a little bit of a look and a sharper focus to see is there any more guidance I can give, certainly from a Stockport point of view, just to ease that process. So good point to raise. I don't think there should be any issue in terms of turning around planning applications, but I will pick it up and have a more detailed look at it back in the council. So thank you, whoever's raised that.
Okay, Caroline, thank you very much. We've got 5 minutes to go, but I think this is an interesting one we've had in. With the Stockport First initiative, are plans being put in place for SMBC procurement to favour business and particular SMEs that are located within the borough? I'm
sure that'll be one element of it. We've already looked from a council point of view. We've been thinking and looking at this for some time, and a large proportion of our spend is already local. That said, could we go further? Yes, I'm sure we could. The call to action really is for everybody, for every resident, for every kind of buyer of goods in Stockport to think Stockport first. So that's the principles behind this promotional campaign, from supporting your local butchers to even your local supermarket, and it builds on that feeling of staying local and the walk into the shops that we've all been doing. There are wider benefits as we could imagine here around sustainable travel and trying to kind of keep as many cars off the road as possible. There are layers of why this would be a very good thing for Stockport, not least of which the support for local businesses. So we're still working through what the principles might be, but I think there could be wider benefits, and it's not a new thing, is it really? It's about how do we build that Stockport spirit. But I think the timing is really important because of that swell of local support and neighbourly spirit and really wanting to look after each other. So I think there is a time into this that we can capture the mood of our residents and our consumers. It absolutely has to tie hand in hand with what Charlie was saying about having places to go that feel safe, not only for employees, for next week to help roll out that national guidance, whatever it is, and try and make it as easy to follow and as understandable. And I think importantly, getting those messages out to residents as well, so consumers feel that businesses are following those guidelines and therefore a safe place to go to if businesses are able to comply and make their model economical, as has been said.
I guess one of the challenges is a viable entity and maintain the social distancing that is going to be required.
So you're absolutely right, Helen, and there have been very intense discussions in Greater Manchester about how do we balance the social distancing, the health agenda, with public transport being an absolute, pillar of our economy. Nobody has the answer at the moment, and it's multiplied many times over with the London transport system. We will hopefully get some further clarity from government on Sunday that makes it a manageable system, because we know, we absolutely don't want to go back to the levels of congestion that we had before, but unfortunately it could head that way very, very quickly, because more people only feel safe in a car as they're going to work. So incredibly difficult balance, and I don't think anybody's got that full answer yet.
I think that's going to be a huge challenge for everyone. Does anybody on the panel have anything? We've literally got a minute left, just that they'd like to wrap up with, or are we okay just to wrap up now?
I think all I'd say is just a quick one to say that basically, if you take away anything from today, it's communicate with each other and support each other. I think they're the main things. Times will be uncertain, but with the communication and support, we will manage to get through it eventually.
Thanks, Charlie. I did actually see somebody popping up on the Q&A there, just saying that Stockport is very proud of its strong and robust business community, how we do actually get along and help each other and work together. So I think that's a very important message to take with us as well. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Thank you very much to the panel. We really appreciate the work that you put into supporting the business community as well. And we will be running a number of these. So if you look on the skbusinessrecovery.co.uk website, you'll see announcements of when the next webinars are going to take up and who will be on our Stockport Recovery Board then. So thanks very much, everybody.